right. I think we're live. Yeah, all right, we're live. And I'm getting my camera set up there. Got a tear on a latex catsuit that someone sent in. And it's currently right side out. So we basically have the arm here, and it's got a big tear. Kind of goes from the armpit area up and around, and then kind of back down. So it's kind of an interesting shape. So the first thing I'm doing right now is I'm using blue painter's tape to try to get the latex back as close as possible, ideally to, close it in so there's no gap if I can. And I've cleaned it off with alcohol so the tape sticks. And this is kind of probably one of the trickiest parts and probably one of the most time consuming too. Just because, the material can move and stretch. And so when you're doing this, you kind of want to make sure that it doesn't pull. If you don't want gravity kind of pulling down on part of it. And so I have a glass jar in here, and I'm kind of using that to work against. And the curve of it can kind of work to my advantage a bit. But I'm going to kind of do this in small little pieces. And I basically just kind of work with it until it lays the way I want it to. What I did, the reason why I started here and then I also went down here is because there was kind of a little jagged spot and I could line things up there. When you've got a straight piece like this, it's a little bit hard to get it to line up. You don't know if it's if the two sides are aligned just right or not. So it's better to kind of, if you can line up some landmarks, some jagged spots, that can really help out a lot. And then basically, I just kind of want to, you can stretch just a little bit. You don't want to do too much because you're going to tape it down and then you're going to put a repair piece across it. And if you do that while it's stretched, then if you stretch it, you can get away with a little bit, but if you stretch it too much and then you glue a patch on top of it, it might kind of pull and wrinkle a little bit. So you don't really want to do more than about 10% on the stretch if you have to. So I'm going to go back over here to the other side, and this is fairly easy to line up here because we have a curve. Actually, I think I'm going to pull my bottle back out. It's kind of getting into the tapered part of the sleeve. It's preventing this from wanting to close. So as you can see, this is why this part is kind of time consuming, is the material is stretchy and it kind of wants to do whatever it wants to do. So trying to get, an alignment is sometimes a little tricky. And it kind of, if you turn it a different direction, it can kind of help. So I'm going to try to work it from this angle. And I'm very careful about pulling too much. I just kind of want to get it to just drape and lay just right, because that's usually what turns out the best once the repair is over with. Try that again. The funny thing is when I do a repair, this usually ends up taking most of the time, and then when you go to actually cut the piece out and glue it down, it doesn't really take that much time. So it's kind of the setup that really is time consuming. But the thing is that this is the most important part. If you really want it to look good, trying to get this to come back together, you can basically make that tear disappear if you do it just right. And so I like to work in just small little pieces with the tape. But it's so worth it to take the time to do this part right, because you can basically make that just disappear. The good thing is if you turn this inside out when you're done, which is where the actual patch is going to go, if you don't like something, if you can see a little bit of the blue when we flip it the other way, you can kind of use some tweezers and kind of peel it up and stretch it over and set it back down and still get really good results. So one of the things you got to be a little bit worried about when you're doing a long stretch like this is you don't want to end up with a lot of excess material. So I'm going to try to get my jar in there a little bit more. If I can kind of get this to all line up, then I'll know that it's going to come together okay. So actually, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish this off right here, because I do have a couple little, you may not be able to see it, but there's a couple little jagged spots right here. If I can get that to line up, I'm going to tape this little part off right here. So now I might even try to kind of round this curve just a little bit. So I'm down here to just this last stretch. What's ideal is if you can get the whole thing to lay just right. You can kind of do this all in one go. Tricky here, so I think this is kind of getting stretched just a bit. The sleeve is right here is just a little bit smaller than this glass jar, so it is kind of getting stretched just a bit. So I don't know, I may elect to not do this in one go. I may try to get it so that it's even on both sides as far as the length, but I think I might probably tape this in a couple of sections. And the trouble that it's kind of giving me, I anticipate when I flip it over, I may have to use some tweezers and kind of rework it just a little bit. Either that, or you know what, I am going to try a slightly smaller jar and see if that works a little bit better for me. It's not stretching it so much. Yeah, that's gonna work a lot better. So it's kind of just a exercise in patience, really. You gotta just kind of get a feel for how the material behaves and all right, so it looks like that came up a little bit right there. Maybe did not clean this spot well enough. Sometimes too, I've found that if latex is a little older, I think this catsuit's probably a few years old, it will sometimes absorb sweat and other things and body oil, and if you really want it the tape to stick to it, you got to sometimes clean it with heptene, which is the solvent for latex. I just used some alcohol. Now I did actually clean the other side that I'm about to turn it inside out over here. I did clean that with heptene already because you need that in order to get a really good bond. So most of it turned out pretty good. I can see a little bit of blue, and that's actually one of the kind of cool things about the blue painter's tape is you can see it so well. So I am going to get some tweezers. I think I might have some right here in this bin. If I don't, I have some in the other room. Right back. Oh, that's cool. All right. Hey, I still have somebody watching me. That's exciting. So I'm going to take and try to close in just a couple of these areas. All right, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take and I'm going to trace out the piece of material that needs to patch this. And I think that I'm going to do that with, I can do it with packing tape, or I can do it with a plastic bag. I think I'm going to try to use packing tape. The most important information to get when you put the packing tape down is the basically the line of where the rip is. I don't want to push down too hard because I don't really want this to stick. Just kind of hold it in place for a second. And then I'm going to use a Sharpie. All right, so now that I have this line drawn, I'm going to carefully remove this. And I want to keep these pieces of tape actually stuck together. This is my template. So here's basically what I need to make for my patch. And I'm just going to kind of expand that and make it about half an inch to 3/4 of an inch wide. That just follows that pattern. So that'll be my next step. I can kind of take this and move this out of the way for a little bit. And I can get some material and cut that out. So I had to go to the other room and get some latex. This is just a standard 0.4 millimeter, kind of what's considered medium thickness. Actually, what I want to do before I put this down, I think I might want to flip it, because we did this from the inside of the suit, and the inside of the suit is kind of the rough textured side of the latex material, because you'll have a smooth side and then you'll have a kind of a rougher side. I'll do it from this side because this kind of works better against the skin, in my opinion, to have that side against your skin. So if we do it this way, then that's what ends up being against your skin. And we're working with the patch on the inside. So I'm going to take my cutting wheel and I'm going to kind of trace this out. Actually, let's just kind of get this separate, make it a little easier to work with. I want to check something real quick. I got like a little weird line that kind of goes off here to the side. I want to lay this back on there and make sure I trace that right. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I don't really know what I think as I was drawing it, I think I kind of went a little further with my marker, and that's not what's really there. So it's always good to double check on things. And kind of when I come to this area, I don't necessarily have to really follow it per se. I can kind of do something like that. Again, right in here, like I might kind of choose to just come across more like this. Rather than to really follow that. So now I can go ahead and peel this off. I can kind of test it out. Just make sure it kind of covers the way I want it to. And then I'll go ahead with a nice brush. Rubber cement, or they also call paper cement. Now, actually, one step I want to do real quick is to flip this over and put some backing on it so that it doesn't curl too much. Sort of a temporary thing. So I let this dry because with the rubber cement, that's how you do it. You actually put it on both surfaces and then you let it dry a little bit, and then it actually bonds really well when you put the two surfaces together. It's like a contact cement. It is one of the trickiest parts, and it is what kind of takes a lot of practice when you go to put it down. So it causes the material to curl, which is why I've put the tape on the back of it. So that kind of keeps it from curling. Now I'm going to also go ahead and put this on here. I'm going to just, one of the things I could have done is I could have taken the patch. When I laid it down to kind of test the fit, I could have marked with a gel pen where the edges of the patch are going to be. That would have kind of helped, you know, with where I'm putting this glue. If you were doing if you were going to have to remove chlorination treatment, this doesn't have chlorination, but if it had chlorination, that's actually what I do to figure out my boundary of where I need to sand. I'll lay the patch on there and then I'll outline it with a gel pen. But the thing about it is, I can kind of do it blind like this, because once I get done, I'll use Heptene to clean up. It just means I'll have a little more cleanup to do, but that's fine. It's not too bad. I have a lot of Heptene. The nice thing about the rubber cement is that it comes off very cleanly with Heptene. It's like it was never there. You just have to be a little bit careful that you don't get too much Heptene up under the patch, because it can kind of release the glue on the edges. I think that's probably pretty good. So I'm going to scope this out and try to figure out the best way to put this down. I think I'm going to start here, and I'm going to lay it and probably go one way and then probably go the other way. It's going to be a little tricky, but I think I can manage it. So this is starting to kind of lay back flat. After a while, the Heptene that's in the glue, which is the solvent that makes the glue wet, it evaporates. And when that happens, then it kind of releases. So I'm going to kind of try to get my my tape back off, at least in the area where I'm about to start it. Ooh, and I don't want to let it touch, like fold back over and touch itself, because it'll bond real quickly. I don't want to try to put it down with the tape on it, because it is very difficult to maneuver. I need to be able to kind of stretch it, and that's a little bit difficult to do. So I will see what I can do. This sometimes doesn't always go real well. This is something to do when you've had good sleep and the latex gods are willing to work in your favor. Because you really kind of want to align it and then put it down, and then just kind of start working it. And if it doesn't go right, then you can kind of peel it back up with Heptene. So I'm pretty happy with how that side went down, but right here I might have to kind of peel this back just a little bit. It kind of started to bond. And the thing about it is you just have to kind of sometimes kind of go with it. And then, you know, you just can't freak out about it if it doesn't lay down the way you expected it to, because there's ways to fix it. So I'm gonna actually need a little heptane. And then I'm going to release this right here because it didn't lay down the way I wanted it to. Sometimes you get it right and sometimes you don't, and it's really not that big of a deal because you can always take some heptane on a brush and then kind of release it so that you can try it again. This part right here. Just kind of pulling off my tape on the other side. All right, so I'm gonna get the rest of this tape off. This was a little bit tricky because of the shape, with it being a kind of a U-shaped piece. Makes it definitely a little bit more challenging, for sure. Get that to lay back down. I kind of peeled this little kind of point off of my blue painter's tape that's on the other side. So sometimes you just got to kind of like let things set for a minute. You know, I put some heptane on here. It kind of makes the latex curl a little bit. I want it to kind of lay back down. I think probably the key is to have good patience, really. So sometimes if you got other stuff going on in your life, you're tired, whatever, you're not going to have the patience, and that's when things aren't going to go real well. So, like right now, with this, putting this heptane on here, it kind of makes the material swell just a little bit. So I'm going to give it just a minute to kind of lay back down. That way when I put this down, it's all nice and flush, no gap. There we go. It looks pretty good. A little bit of a bump right there. Let me see if I can kind of get that to lay back down. Hey, get away from there. All right. So I lost a little bit of glue right in that spot. I'm going to put just a little bit back right here where I kind of did the heptane. Now the one tricky thing is trying to figure out where your seam is. You got to kind of look at it in the right light, and I can kind of see it. I want to make sure that I'm... Oh, look at this. I didn't realize I had originally peeled this back a little bit more because there's a wrinkle right down here. Shoot. Right when I was about to grab it to start laying it down, I realized that it had kind of restuck itself and made a wrinkle there. So let's get this to... Well, you're getting to experience one of the slightly more challenging ones. Normally, I would probably be done and cleaned up by now. But you never know when you're doing these. Sometimes some of them are real easy to do. Some of them misbehave. Sometimes I have to take a break and just finish the next day if it gets to be too frustrating. If it's not cooperating, you can always just come back and finish the next day. There's nothing wrong with that. So I'm just kind of making sure that my little seam here is laying flat. It looks pretty good. It's getting there. Add just a touch of glue. I thought I was all ready to go. I'm going to look at this piece too and see, do I maybe need to add just a little bit of glue here. Alright, I'm going to let that dry just a little bit. Do a little bit more. Alright. Now, only bad thing about this piece kind of moving around is I picked up some little pieces of something on here. It's sticky. Don't want that because you'll end up with lumps under your patch. All right. So we're ready to lay this down. Got one little air bubble right here. What I can actually do, I have a needle. I can take and jab this needle into the side of that little air bubble. So that I can basically release the air that's trapped under there. Nice little hard rubber brayer. What I'll do is let it set overnight, and then I may take a look at it later to see how it looks. And if I need to, if I'm not happy with if it's got some wrinkles or something, I can actually take some Heptene and brush it all over, and it kind of releases the glue just a little bit, and then you can roll it, and then it'll lay back down, and it can really make it look 100 times better if I'm not happy with it. Now somehow I ended up with a little bit extra. I think I might have stretched it a little bit as I was doing it, so I'm going to have to actually add just a little bit of glue to get this last little bit down. which is actually probably pretty good that I have this because it's right here in the armpit, so I can take all the help it can get. You can lay it down wet, but then you have to really kind of just sit there and work with it and put pressure on it until it finally starts to set. And so it's honestly just easier to not put it down until it's dried a little bit. You'll be a lot happier. A little bit more here. This didn't get glued down. And one of the things that you can do is take a small screwdriver and check around your edges to see if they need any additional glue. Because what I have found is that if an edge isn't glued down, and you can kind of go like this too actually, if an edge is not glued down, then it will eventually peel up. So it's best if you can get the edges glued down and keep them glued down. One of the things you'll have to be careful about is when you go to clean with Heptene, you know, some of this excess glue needs to be cleaned off. You want to probably go back with the screwdriver at that point and check all of your edges and make sure that they're down. Now I have a little spot here that's got a wrinkle. And if I take some Heptene on the small screwdriver, I can kind of release that a little bit. And honestly, there's probably enough glue in there. I don't really need to add any. I can probably just put some pressure on it and get that to stick. So now I'm going to go and check out the other side. But before I do that, I think I'm going to put just a little bit of some talc powder. Just so when I'm going to turn this inside out, or really right side out, and when I do that, I don't want this stuff to kind of stick to itself, the excess glue that's around the edges. You can also, if you're not happy with how the seam has come together, you can always take like the small screwdriver or a Q-tip and some Heptene and work kind of into the seam. Like if there's a gap somewhere, you can kind of release it a little bit and then pull it tighter. And you may not even have to add glue. If you just add just a tiny bit of Heptene to release it, then the glue is pretty much still there and it'll kind of reactivate. Now, right here I have a wrinkle, but this is actually, the customer had done a repair before, and so there's not a lot I can do about that unless I want to start getting into their patch job. But that if I start doing that, I'm going to be up all night because there's a lot of patches on this suit. And they only asked us to do this one repair right here, so that is all I'm planning to do. Now this part of the suit does look a little different where the tape was, because I had cleaned that really well with alcohol right in here, so it was real. I had stripped off any lube or whatever is on the latex, and then I put the tape down. Of course, when you rip the tape back up, it's going to pull up. So eventually that'll look fairly normal, especially when you do a coat of polish or something on it. And in fact, I'll probably put some powder on this before I ship it, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. You really can't see the repair. What you will see is you will see the material that's under it. That's just kind of an unavoidable thing. But when you wear it, honestly, like, it won't show up quite as much. Like, once this gets stretched, you're gonna see, you're gonna see like that. So I mean, it's visible. That's one thing about it when you do a repair, is it'll never be brand new. But if it's in a non-obvious place, like under the arm like this, you probably won't really notice it. So you could still wear this out and nobody would even care. Of course, it's something you wear in the bedroom, then it's more of a function thing. But that's pretty much it, except for doing a little bit of cleanup. And that's fairly easy to do. In fact, I could probably, I got some Heptene right here. I could probably do a little bit of that right here. The main thing why you want to do this is because otherwise, if you leave that glue, it will eventually want to try to stick to itself. So you don't really want it folding over and bonding. After you do this, it's a good idea to roll it again because this will kind of release the glue just a little bit, so you can actually use it to your advantage to kind of reset the seam just a bit. Good idea to try different spots on the paper towel because otherwise you're just kind of smearing glue around. You see how it's trying to stick to itself. So right after you do this, you really want to go ahead and powder it, and then I'll roll it. I think that's pretty much it. And check the outside, make sure I don't need to do any cleanup, but the outside actually looks pretty good. Might put a little bit of powder on it, just in case. And powder will just keep things from trying to stick and bond. And that's, I think, call that done. Do one last little roll right here. Thanks for tuning in.